Welcome. My name is Natasha Sherman and I am your host. And today's show is about Haiti. Still reeling from the devastation of the 2010 earthquake, they are right now at this very moment confronted with the devastation from Hurricane Matthew. Haiti is one of the poorest countries in the world and the poorest in the American region. What can we do and what do we need to be aware of? So my first guest is Morgan Wienberg. This is the second time we've talked to Morgan. In 2010, when Morgan was 18 years old, she went to Haiti to volunteer after the earthquake. Haiti became her home, and she is the co-founder and coordinator of Little Footprints, Big Steps. It was founded to aid in rescuing children from situations of abuse, slavery, homelessness, or severe neglect. And they do this by reuniting families, supporting education, and opportunities for self-sufficiency and dignity through their programs and services and collaborations. So they created a transitional safe house for children who are waiting to be reunited with their families. And I just want to let you know that 89% of donations are used directly for the children. So now Hurricane Matthew hit. And Morgan is joining us to tell us firsthand what we should know and be aware of. Morgan, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back.
Yes, it's great to talk to you, even under these circumstances. I'm going to introduce my other two guests. My other guest is Maybelle Jadotte, who is of Haitian descent, born in New York. She is a crisis communications specialist with tons of experience and strong ties to Haiti. And welcome, Maybelle.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
And my other guest is Fritz Clairvil. He is one of the vice consuls at the Haitian Consulate. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I'm very happy that you're here, and I'm very happy that we can talk about this situation. Morgan, I'm going to start with you. Kind of tell us what's happening on the ground, because you were there during the hurricane.
I was there during the hurricane and for the first 2 weeks following. And I'm now in Canada to complete strategic planning and raise some support. We were aware that the hurricane was coming. Many Haitians were aware as well, but we really had no idea it would be this devastating. And for the southern regions of Haiti, being Département Sud and the Grand Est, it's completely destroyed the entire regions. These are regions that are very much dependent on agricultural production, and you can drive for 8 hours without seeing a single tree. It just looks like a forest fire, ravaged the entire countryside. There are no living trees standing. And there are communities, when you're driving through them, you can't even recognize where you are. Looking around, you just ask, where did the communities go? More rural regions literally lost all of the structures. There are fewer structures left standing than those that were destroyed. It's absolutely devastating. And many of the regions in the mountainside don't even have temporary shelters for people to seek refuge. So families are literally living on the plot where their home used to be, completely exposed. And now, 2 weeks later, they've been experiencing extreme flooding on top of that. So we already had cholera outbreaks starting. Actually, even before the hurricane, there were some regions beginning to have cholera. And of course, in the weeks following the hurricane, cholera outbreaks have been increasing, as well as so many other illnesses. Personally, we've been dealing with many cases of typhoid. Children and families have been stepping on nails, have been cut by metal roofing as their houses blew away and they were running through the hurricane in the middle of the night. People are really so traumatized. This is what really disturbed me, was psychologically it seems very difficult for people to move on because they're still in such a state of shock. Yet at the same time, immediately following the hurricane, I was out the afternoon after it finished. I was expecting to see, the response. because I'd been to civil protection meetings beforehand. The NGOs in the area had been aware that the hurricane was coming. And yet, for the first week following the hurricane, there was no response from international aid. No response, not even clean water. And here you have thousands of people displaced. In Lekai alone, this is the city that I live in, there were over 10,000 people displaced and in temporary shelters. And those shelters literally didn't even get treated water for over a week following the hurricane.
So no homes, no water, no food, and no response.
Flooding. And many of the temporary shelters were even destroyed. So the temporary shelters primarily were national schools or Catholic churches, but some of those temporary shelters that we had actually evacuated people into prior to the hurricane, the shelters were destroyed. So people literally have nowhere to go. I'm
going to interrupt you here for a minute. So for most of us living in our daily lives, excluding you because you're living there, this is like unfathomable. It's something you read that happens somewhere, but it's almost like a movie. You're not experiencing it. It's hard to imagine experiencing this much devastation and no resources. So it's extraordinarily critical. So I'm going to ask you to kind of create your context for this and what you have to say in response, or even just because this, Haiti being the poorest country in the world didn't happen by accident either. So maybe you can address some of this.
You're absolutely right. In fact, if we just to share some historical context, in its heyday, which is unfortunately 65 years ago, this was a #1 tourist destination in the Caribbean. I don't know if you watch old classic movies with Ava Gardner.
Yes.
And Errol Flynn, but that's where they used to vacation. And what attracted them was the hospitality, the glitzy hotels, the glamour, and also it offered the luxury that you'd find in top-notch hotels. Well, that was 65 years ago. And what you have now, or what Haiti's known for, is, political instability, natural disasters, unfortunately, just a basket case, but there's more to Haiti than this. And what I find is to really be troubling is that there is a history, the precedent, which goes as back to when they had their revolution in 1804 and defeating the French. But being the first Black nation, you were under constant attack and really had to fortify. There are a number of forts created all around Haiti to protect them. 58 years later, they still weren't acknowledged by the United States government because that had to acknowledge the first Black nation had undermined the slave trade that was happening here. That's the underpinning of the economic development here in the United States. You have a nation that independence is at the root of. Independence, both economic as well as physical, is something that's extremely important, where they help liberate 7 other countries, including the United States. And that's not something that's common knowledge, but over 750 freed Haitian men came and fought in the Revolutionary War here. And where more recently it's been acknowledged by Savannah, Georgia, and they've erected a monument to acknowledge those that perished. But you also have Latin American others, and they are being, unfortunately, despite these efforts and these strides, have not really invested in critical infrastructure. Have not really.
Who said they you're talking about?
I would say both Haiti as a government, but also the international community. Take, for instance, the earthquake in 2010. 99% of the funds committed for Haiti went to international NGOs, non-government organizations, and only 1% went to the Haitian government. How can you talk about recovery and rebuilding if the money isn't going? There's no accountability.
Absolutely. So now I'm going to direct the next question toward you. So what could have been done or what can be done about that? Because clearly, and we all hear these stories about money. People really want to make a difference, want to contribute. They send money, they give, but not everybody can follow the money. Not all of us can get on the ship and follow the goods and make sure that they've gotten there. Where is the major breakdown and what can be done to change that?
Well, what happened prior to the earthquake, whenever there's a situation like this happen, a disaster in Haiti, they used to send the money, the aid used to go directly to the government. It's been said and reported that the government misused the funds. Thereby, they have decided through United Nations and other members, organizations that are affiliated with the United Nations, that they will send the money, they will handle the recovery process themselves. And what it turns out that they did the worse than the government. Morgan can perhaps attest to that. Right now we're about six years after the earthquake. Very little to show for what happened with all the money that has been collected on behalf of Haiti.
We're talking about billions.
And this is money that was redirected. It wasn't given to the Haitian government because they felt that it was being mismanaged. So they said, okay, we're going to manage your money. And still, bottom line is, the Haitians themselves are not seeing any of that. Morgan, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I definitely want to add to that, and I'm so glad you brought up this point, because there are a lot of errors that came out of the way international aid responded to the earthquake. And we're looking at the hurricane now, which I definitely think that the hurricane will have greater long-lasting damage than the earthquake did, because it has wiped out all the agricultural crops. So a famine and extreme illness is coming. But the way that we help is so important. And I personally have witnessed, following the hurricane, NGOs which are in place and there and perhaps have strategic planning done, but very disappointing execution of actual distribution. It just wasn't happening. And part of that is because those major NGOs don't have the relationships and networking with the local communities. And that's something that does exist. The local authorities and local community leaders are in place. And I personally have witnessed them making such an effort, even though they are victims themselves, making such an effort with what little resources they have to help others in the community. And if even a fraction of the resources that the NGOs have was actually being funneled through those community networks, the distribution would have happened so much more effectively. And I actually read an article this morning about that. And one point that it made, which really I feel very strongly about, was that we need to recognize Haitians not just as victims and survivors, but also as experts and leaders, because they are the ones living this situation. They know what the needs are right now, and they know how to best, build up their community. And if it's Haitians rebuilding their own lives, then we know that the results are going to be more sustainable. And hopefully, if we are to invest in, collaborating with local authorities, which, although the Haitian government has a bad reputation, I work very closely with, the Child Protection Authority, Social Affairs, Ministry for Women's Rights. And I've seen these government workers, whose homes were destroyed and they're sleeping on a chair at a friend's house, come to work at 6 a.m, even though they're not being paid. And, a social worker was called in for a case of a 4-year-old who was sexually assaulted in a temporary shelter. And here is this social worker, like I said, who's also lost his home, who has to go by foot to address this sexual assault case because they don't have the vehicles and resources. And meanwhile, there are NGOs with multiple vehicles, yet they're sitting in, hotels strategizing. So it's not that the NGOs aren't well-intentioned, but they need to collaborate with the local authorities and community leaders in order to be more effective in their distribution. And if we invest in the local government, the local community networks, then the way that they rebuild will be more sustainable. So hopefully the next time there is a disaster like this, the response and infrastructure will already be there, so it will have less of an impact on the communities.
You know, it's interesting. It's almost like infantilizing an entire population, saying we're your mommy and daddy. But we're actually your step parents. We're not even directly your parents, and we're going to tell you how to live your life, and we're going to tell you how to spend your money, as opposed to empowering you and teaching you to do what you need to do. You were going to say something.
You know, that was such an excellent point. You're right, how, you know, the answers that people seek are within the community, and not only engaging Haitian people in Haiti, but also those of Haitian descent in the diaspora. You have 10 cities across the United States, New York, Miami, Chicago, Atlanta, just Boston, just to name a few, where Washington, D.C. in particular, where you have people who have a tremendous amount of experience that are not engaged in the process. The international community does not have a tendency to bring in expertise. Not only do we understand the cultural context, we speak the language, we have the expertise, you know, whether it's in logistics, GIS, or medical. 1/3 of all Black doctors within the tri-state area of Haitian descent. Could you imagine the cadre that you have of doctors and nurses who would be more than willing to go and support these types of efforts? But it shouldn't just end there. We need to be focused on building the capacity of the state and building the capacity of local organizations on the ground, be it faith-based institutions. There are over 1,600 pastors in the South just 3 weeks ago that were trained by the Converge Network, who represent, imagine, about 500 or more individuals at a church. You have schools that are impacted. You have 500,000 children who are impacted in the South. So it's not simply impacting it in their homes, but also at school and just not even having a basic subsistence for them to eat. There's an opportunity to engage the diaspora here in the United States and abroad, as well as the Haitian people, and really have a dialogue.
Why hasn't that happened?
Unfortunately, you know, having worked in government and also experienced, you know, public-private partnerships, people do unfortunately operate in silos. And my euphemism for it is a cylinder of excellence. It's still a silo, and not being considered. But also, what are the objectives and goals? When you think about, you know, what are the drivers of the various organizations, and what is the end goal? And when you sit down and you craft and you have strategy sessions without the inclusion of a mayor, without the inclusion of a local leader or a community leader, how are you really engaging and understanding the needs of the people on the ground?
Right, it's you deciding for them. Fritz, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yes. After the earthquake, what the Haitian people experienced is that there were more beds come out of all the invasion of the international NGOs. Because when they landed in Haiti, they created inflation, and the price of rental and everything become very pricey, because they came with a lot of money, and a lot of money being put into administration, fees, but very little go directly to services and recovery. And that has been, and after they left, they left an economy that was a forced economy that was depending on a temporary situation, and it creates a lot of problems. And I'm hoping, and this is what our office, what we're doing right now, when somebody come to the office and willing to go to Haiti, what we're trying to do is to help them, guide them to the process, and let them know exactly where we want them to go and what type of service that we need. Because when the NGOs, when they go there, sometimes they decide what to do on their own. Just like Morgan said, they do not involve the local authorities, the local communities. They just go there and do whatever they want. In fact, I've seen situations where they give them food. Some of the foods that the people, even though they experience in famine, but they're not accustomed to eat those kind of food. So you have a different type of situations because of lack of cultural competencies. So we are hoping this time we have a little bit more control, lesson learned and lesson apply at this time, because we figured that on the aftermath of this is going to have a terrible, long-lasting impact on the living of the people there.
And so what would your focus be? What do you think are the first steps needed?
Well, first thing is to provide them with food, water, medical assistance. Like right now, we collect a lot of toiletries, hygiene materials to send to them. And the second phase would be to, well, you can do that simultaneously, is to provide them shelter. Because while they need to eat, they need to be fed, but at the same time, they need a place over their roof. I mean, a roof over the family.
And
so
if I may add something as well, you know, once the kind of life-saving things are done, you know, basic human needs are met, you also want to create stimulus in terms of the economy. So engaging, not only building back their homes, but also there needs to also be a standard, because Haiti doesn't have an international standard when it comes to building a home. There is no, like, people build to the standard that they desire, but there is no one standard. A Category 5 a Category 5 hurricane, even the homes here in New York and New Jersey would not necessarily withstand that, because we're not building to that code. In Florida, maybe there's more of a chance, but in Haiti, it was already doomed to fail. You have poor roads, poor infrastructure, you don't have electricity, you don't have, you know, kind of telephone systems, you don't have, you know, clean water for drinking. So you have this hurricane. Previously you had cholera, previously you had the earthquake. So this is now has the potential to be a mega disaster. You 6 years out of the earthquake, you still haven't recovered. And now you have something that is now compounding the situation. It's just making it far worse.
And it occurs to me that the theme here is nothing will succeed unless you get the Haitian people involved in the decision-making processes. Exactly. And also creating some common future goal. So it's not just patches here and patches there to fix something temporarily, but to create a common vision of how to then take it to the next level. Morgan, do you have something you want to add here?
Absolutely. As mentioned, right now the urgent needs are really medical care, clean water, you know, emergency food. And you can drive out into the mountains where you're just thinking, what are these people going to eat? There's nothing, and they're subsistence farmers. But the main thing that they are asking for is water purification tablets.
Wow.
They're begging for water.
Something as simple as that.
Yes.
Exactly. It's at that point. And, you know, there are people who have been injured and still 3 weeks later haven't had any kind of medical care. So those are immediate needs. But I'm so glad that you brought up the importance of economic stimulation. Already 1 week after the hurricane, inflation had already tripled food prices.
Wow.
The price of roofing materials and food had tripled. The price of drinking water had doubled in Jeremy. This is 1 week after the hurricane. So now as these resources continue to dry up, that's only going to get higher. The inflation is going to increase. Even transportation, the price of taking a taxi has doubled in certain regions.
Wow.
So here you have communities where there are no trees, you know, for protection from any kind of sunlight or rain or anything. There's no food sources except for what people are able to gather from, you know, the livestock that have just died or the trees that have just fallen. But once those are done, they're going to be dependent on aid. So economic stimulation is so important, not only for when we're looking at food security and people being able to survive, but also I think for the mental health of the communities. For example, right now what I'm seeing is people really don't even know how to move forward. And if all we do is give them handouts continually, yes, it will look after their physical needs, but they'll still be sitting there not sure how to continue with their lives. So if we engage them in rebuilding their own lives, not only do they take ownership and it will be more sustainable, but it also helps the locals to, feel that they're moving forward, feel that they can create change. For example, many of the families that we work with in Grandance, which is an area that was completely devastated, and again, it's an area very much dependent on agricultural production, those families were expressing that even more important than shelter for them is they want to start planting their gardens again.
Yeah.
This was the main thing they were asking for. So
Morgan, I'm going to have to interrupt you here. We're at the end of our first half hour, so we're going to stop, take a short break, and then we'll start our second half hour because I think there's a lot more to be said. All right?
Okay.
Thank you. My name is Natasha Sherman. Thank you for joining us, and please stay tuned for the second half hour.